Good morning. It is Tuesday, November 18th, 2014. This is your morning edition on I-24 News. And breaking news this morning out of Jerusalem, just a couple of minutes or approximately an hour ago, assailants enter a synagogue in Jerusalem, and with conflicting reports on the weapons used, but either gunning down or using axes and killing approximately maybe 4 or 5 people. Again, conflicting reports this morning. We are joined from Jerusalem right now by the chief spokesperson for the Israeli police, Mickey Rosenfeld. Mickey, good morning to you.
Good morning.
What do we know as of this moment regarding the attack in Jerusalem?
Just over 45 minutes ago, 2 suspects entered inside the synagogue as people were praying. They were armed with knives and axes, as far as we know. And they attacked a number of people at the scene inside the synagogue. Police units quickly arrived in the area, and the 2 suspects were shot and killed. At the moment, the area is cordoned off, and those that are being treated at the scene, at least 7 people injured, treated at the scene and being taken to Jerusalem hospitals at the moment. And we're looking to see where the suspects came from and how they arrived in the Harnof neighborhood.
From the initial reports that you're describing right now, we do not know the weapons used exactly?
We've confirmed, and what we know is there was definitely a knife used and also an axe. We're also looking to see if they used a weapon as well. At this moment in time, what is important is that the suspects were shot and killed by police officers, and we're looking into the area around to see if there are any other suspects in the area.
And the assailants were shot and killed in the synagogue or while trying to get away. Do we know what time exactly this happened?
This happened just over 45 minutes ago. The suspects were shot by police that arrived at the scene.
And the assailants that were shot, any information about the people who perpetrated this attack?
We're looking into their background, where they came from. We don't have their final identities yet at the moment. Also going to be looking in the area for other evidence, such as CCTV footage. But at this moment in time, we've heightened security across Jerusalem, just 45 minutes after this initial attack.
Okay, and in terms of security in Jerusalem, as you said, the place is cordoned off. Any other security measures being taken place in Jerusalem right now when it comes also to extra security around the city? Any more information about suspected attacks? And was there any intelligence about this specific attack that happened 45 minutes ago?
No, there was no specific intelligence. We're going to have to look and see where these suspects came from, how they managed to make their way into Jerusalem, and to see which neighborhood they come from. At the moment, the situation on the ground is under control, but we're not taking any chances whatsoever, and that's why heightened security across Jerusalem at the moment.
Mickey Rosenfeld, thank you for joining us with these very preliminary details and report from Jerusalem. We're going straight right now to Ori Shachan from the Israeli medical units that were arriving at the scene in Jerusalem. As we mentioned, breaking news this morning, a terror attack, what appears to be a terror attack in a synagogue in Jerusalem. Ori Shachan from the Israeli medical units, Magen David Adom, that were arriving at the scene. What did you notice? What is going on in the synagogue right now?
Well, I want to explain to the listeners, the synagogue is not one big hall. It contains some halls or some rooms. So as far as we know, Magen David Adom teams arrived to the scene and find the victims spread around in several rooms. They immediately started taking care of them, performing life-saving procedures, and we currently can report about 10 victims in this terror attack, of whom 5 are in critically condition still at the scene, and additional 5 already evacuated to the hospitals around Jerusalem. And in addition, we have the 2 terrorists that were neutralized by the security forces on the scene.
And when it comes to fatalities, you mentioned, I'm going over these details again because this is coming in as we're speaking. 10 injured, 5 critically. Do we know how many people were killed other than the assailants in this attack at this point?
Well, currently we are not speaking about fatalities, but I can confirm that there are 5 critically injured victims who are at the scene right now, still at the scene, and 5 additional 5 were already evacuated, plus 2 terrorists that were neutralized.
Are people being treated right now at the scene by the Magen David Adom medical units?
Exactly. Magen David Adom first responders arrived to the scene minutes after the event has begun, equipped with life-saving equipment, started treating them. And as I said, as I heard, the situation is under control right now, and I think the police and the other security agencies will now investigate this event.
No, definitely. I mean, there's very little information that we know right now. We know of 2 assailants. If you can describe once again, the scene that you arrived to, that the medical unit people arrived to in the morning, about 45 minutes ago. We're looking at the synagogue. This seems to be a very prominent synagogue in Jerusalem. And what was seen when they came in?
Well, it was early morning. The people were in the middle of their morning prayer, spread among several rooms. The terrorists got into the synagogue using knives, axes, and also some sort of shooting weapons. I don't know if they were guns or handguns,
right.
But we saw people injured both from stabbing and from gunshot wounds. It's a difficult scene. It's a harsh scene. It's hard to see people in the middle of their prayer being attacked brutally, and unfortunately, those are the results as I reported.
Shacham, as you said, this is still an active scene. We are looking at pictures coming in straight live from Jerusalem right now. Shacham, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We might be checking in with you a little bit later on. We are joined right now by Matthias, the I-24 News correspondent, on his way to Jerusalem. Matthias, good morning to you. I know that are you in the city already?
Yes, good morning, Yael.
And Matthias, what are you seeing? I know you are on your way to Jerusalem. Very little information that's coming in, except that this is definitely an attack. It looks like a terror attack. It's in Jerusalem, in a synagogue, in the holiest place for Jews, morning prayers in Jerusalem. It's very little information coming in, though. On the way to the city, is security tightened? Is the city closed off? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I can see that there is a huge traffic jam, Yael, close to the scene, where there's definitely it is a terror attack made by 2 Palestinians in the heart of Jerusalem, in the Arnold neighborhood, in a synagogue and in yeshiva, close to a place where all the Jews were praying now, the first prayer of Shacharit. You know, it reminds us the terror attack made by a terror 3 years ago in the Merkaz Arav, where you can remember a terror enter with a Kalashnikov and started to shoot all the students. So now this is the same way. 2 Palestinians, they were wearing guns, axes, and knives. They shoot all over. People were praying at the scene. We can talk now on 5 deaths. This is an unofficial report, but now the police officers are talking about 5 deaths and 2 police officers seriously injured, because there is now on the scene, it seems that there is a run over after the third terrorist on the scene in the neighborhood. Still 3 that police forces are running after him, are looking after him.
That's supposed that you're hearing reports that supposedly there's a 3rd gunman. You know, as you said, you know, we're not getting in confirmed reports of that. But where you're at right now, I'm assuming security is very tight and trying to get into the city. And as you said, what we're hearing is supposedly 5 killed, an additional 2, the assailants, gunned down by police. But a very tense scene. Matthias, thank you. We'll be checking in with you very shortly. Also with me in the studio is Tal Shalev, I-24 News diplomatic correspondent, and Or Nahari, Channel 1, Israeli Channel 1 Foreign Affairs senior editor. Tal Shalev, I want to start with you very quickly. Obviously, we know very little right now. We don't have exact information, but this is on the heels of the wave of the Jerusalem attacks. This would be the deadliest one, right?
Well, definitely. It's the most severe attack we've had, I think, in years in Jerusalem, not only in this latest wave of violence, and it actually comes after a few days that there was a feeling that tensions were lowering and that the situation was calming down following the Israeli Prime Minister's visit to Amman last week. And this is a very heinous attack. I think one of the most murderous attacks, and the fact that it's in a synagogue will probably create even a more painful psyche for the Israeli public. It's a symbol of prayer. So we're already getting responses, very harsh responses from the Israeli political system. The Speaker of the Knesset, Yuli Edelstein, already issues a statement in which he, of course, blames the Palestinian leadership for incitement. He says that this attack shows the essence of the Palestinian position. While Israel is working and opting to restore the calm, the incitement continues and brings to this attack which breaks records of cruelness, according to Edelstein, the Knesset Speaker. And this will probably be the line of responses and reactions coming from the Israeli government, while we'll probably can expect to see very tough calls from the right-wing side of Netanyahu's coalition, calling to demonstrate even more forceful reactions and more forceful measures to battle this wave of terror.
I know, and we're looking at very dramatic footage here that we were seeing from Israeli channels, from Israeli local channels of gun battles. Oren Nehari of Israeli Channel 1 sitting with me in the studio. Thank you for being here originally to speak about Iran. This happened only 45 minutes ago. And as we're looking at this footage, Jerusalem, a battle town, something like that actually signifies, and it's a horrible thing to say, but this is something that on a week leading up to talks with Iran, this is something that actually, the Israeli administration is also going to say, look at what's going on in Israel. I mean, we cannot pull down the guard of security or anything to that effect.
First of all, Israel says it. I mean, look at the Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech at the UN, saying again and again, Hamas is ISIS, ISIS is Hamas, etc., etc. And these days, I mean, I'm sure that the comparison will be made again. This brutality of praying people murdered on the site of prayer, although we do remember that most of the attacks of ISIS and Al-Qaeda are against mosques.
Yes.
Not most of them, but many of them. I mean, the murderers...
But when it's a religious still, what's into religious, in such a religious site.
Of course, in a religious site. So the comparison will be made, and after yesterday, the beheading of Abdul Rahman Kassig, or Peter Kassig, and the site of two, the Frenchmen and the other Western national held in Al-Qaeda hands. Yes, again, I presume that the government of Israel will try to drive the comparison home. I'm not sure that Iran comes to it. Again, they'll say that we cannot lower our guard, generally speaking, in the Middle East of such acts of of course, they'll try and fail to stop the Spaniards, for example, who are voting today on the creation of a Palestinian state. Right. Israel, from its point of view, will say, look at the Palestinians, look what they are doing, and the West come and says to Israel, look, this is because they do not have a state. If they do have a state, if there is a peaceful solution, or at least a peace process, then these things will stop. Look what this road brought you, and the two sides will be blind and mute to the other side demands / reasoning, etc. We're going to see it, and but if we're talking about it, the networks in the West, the newspaper, the sites, what they are saying at the moment: 2 wounded in terrorist attack.
In quotation marks.
In quotation marks,
right.
In Israel, according to Israeli sources, both attackers killed. So that's the headline coming from all over, from American, British, and other sources. That is very, very...
it's indicative
I will say, if I want to be very polite, very, very cautious headlines of what is happening at the moment, because as we see the pictures, I'm sure that there's no question about it. This is a terror attack.
This is a terror attack. Speaking
no
of
quotation marks neaded.
No, definitely, and rightfully put in that way. We are also joined by Knesset Minister from Yesh Atid, Mr. Rabbi Dov Lipman. Good morning to you, on the phone with us.
Good morning.
Good morning. First of all, the initial reports, but this really seems to be another terror attack, and a wave of violence that is hitting Jerusalem. As Tal Shalev mentioned here, this looks like the most heinous, most violent attack that we've witnessed in the course of the last month and a half. As Yesh Atid, part of the coalition, I know everybody has been purporting trying to go back to some form of calm. What would be the reaction of the coalition to something like that? What can the government do this morning in trying to combat what seems to be just a growing and more, violent wave of terror?
I believe the reaction within the Knesset will go across all barriers, right-wing, left-wing, coalition, opposition. We condemn a horrible terror attack in the strongest of terms. We put the blame on the incitement from the Arab leadership, and this is not simply an issue of blame game. This is, I sat in the studio, in your studio last week, and a Fatah spokesman talked about the Jews contaminating Al-Aqsa Mosque. When people on the street hear that, it incites them to act in the way they've done. It's time for the Arab leaders to come out and say, yes, this was a terror attack. This has to stop. That's what we're expecting. And, of course, the security forces will react strongly, and our responsibility is to restore calm and security to the people of Israel in the streets of Jerusalem.
And how do you think that calm can be restored? What can the government do? Because this is not going away. This is not stopping. Measures that have been taken as of yet simply do not seem to deter assailants, terror attackers, and terrorists.
It's absolutely correct that especially when you have individuals and individuals where you can't even see where they're coming from, why they're acting, it's hard even for the intelligence community to do so. There's no doubt stronger security. Unfortunately, we're going to have to probably see more situations of roadblocks and checking those that are coming from Arab communities. That's a shame. It's a shame that now we're driven to take actions which are going to make it more difficult for people who may want to live peacefully with us. But I also believe there's no doubt that there has to be action taken to bring the incitement to a stop. The incitement is what's leading to this, and we have to find a way. And I will also say, from world leaders as well, the world has to come down hard on this terror. You just mentioned about the international headlines about reportedly terrorist attacks. Come out, say it like it is. We're fighting against Islamic terrorists, fundamentalists who are out to kill Jews and non-Jews alike, and we have to view it in this way. And I do agree with the guest that you have that this should be seen in the context of a global picture as well. I've been saying for a while that we're dealing with the issue of Jerusalem, but in the broader picture, until the world wakes up and realizes that there's a war here against this fundamentalist Islam, we're never going to succeed in defeating it. And at the moment, we have to see it in that context.
And speaking of the world recognizing, as you mentioned, yes, this is a heinous attack. This seems to be the worst in the wave of violence that we've been seeing in the last 2 months, specifically in Jerusalem. This conflict is taking a very big religious turn. Is it time for the Israeli government to also recognize this possibly as what many people are purporting to be a third intifada, a religious third intifada carried out in Jerusalem?
I never understood the entire word game of intifada, yes or no. We are being attacked. There's no doubt about it. It's been happening and building slowly but surely, but we've seen it happening in front of us, and we have to act out against it in the strongest of ways. I do call on the security forces, and I know that they will, to come down hard on anyone who was involved in this attack. I'm sure that they will be investigating to see not just the 2 terrorists who were apparently killed, but beyond that, who was involved, who helped them, how'd they get there, and we have to get to the bottom of where this is all coming from. And yes, we are without a doubt in the midst of a terrorist wave against us. And again, so much of it driven by incitement about things that aren't factual. Now, I do call on the Israeli side, and I have all along. We have to be careful in terms of how we say things, what we do as well. But there's no comparison at this point in terms of the level of incitement that's coming from the Islamic side.
Mr. Ben, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Tal Shalev, I-24 News diplomatic correspondent, with me in the studio. Reactions coming out already from the Israeli government, aren't they?
Yeah, the leader of the right-wing Jewish Home Party, Naftali Bennett, who has already become, in the past few weeks, Israeli politicians have become quite accustomed and regular to issuing very quick and swift statements after attacks. So he does issue a statement, of course, pointing the blame to the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, which he calls, quote, one of the biggest terrorists that the Palestinians have ever created. He says that Abbas bears direct responsibility for the Jewish blood spilling, and he also adds that while Israel was hallucinating about a diplomatic process, the Palestinians were preparing an infrastructure of terror and incitement. And he says quite clearly that Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, this is a quote, declared war on Israel, and we must respond to that. So what does this mean to respond to this war? One of the problems that the Israeli security system has been standing in front is that most of these terror attacks have been independent terror attacks, not directly affiliated with any terror organization, which makes it much more difficult to combat, much more difficult to understand where the source, and much more difficult to prevent in advance.
Now, it's the $1 million question. Oren Ehai, I'm glad you're here with us because you and I, being of of covering this over the course of the last several decades. As Tal Shalev mentioned, we don't know much about this specific attack right now, but over the course of the last month and a half, we have seen a wave of violence in Jerusalem, but by one-man bands, by people who basically go out there with the car, using their cars as a weapon of violence. As mentioned here, neither Hamas nor the Islamic Jihad, they can welcome the attacks. They say that they're happy that they're happening, but then nobody's taking responsibility for it. So who can be actually combated when Lippman from the Yesh Atid party says we need to come down strong on this? Who?
That's the big question, and it's also in every such a situation, and we'll try to be calm and we try to be detached, and we can't and we shouldn't be. But from Israeli point of view, when there is an attack, the other side is always rational. The other side, if let's say Mahmoud Abbas gives an order or gives a wink, it goes down to the last person on the West Bank or Gaza or whatever. We know that we've got problems. We know that Netanyahu got a coalition government, etc., etc. And from the other side as well, when the Palestinians look at, let's say, a proposal by Parliament member Tzipi Khotobeli, they look at someone who is from the Likud party, who is in the coalition. If she puts suggestions concerning the Temple Mount, then of course Netanyahu is involved with it. Of course Netanyahu gives the wink or the nudge or the go-ahead signal. Everyone looks at the other side as completely rational, as the one that, like in Stalin days, the boss gives the order and it goes down to the last person on the empire. It doesn't work like that. And of course people know and should know that it doesn't happen. Of course there is incitement, and there are the books that are taught in schools. It's all there, but the views that makes the lone person decide, or here we've got perhaps two or three. So it's an organization of some sort. Yeah. It can be two brothers or three brothers or cousins, and it's very, very hard to penetrate. It's not a system. It's not a Hamas or a Fatah or even an ISIS. This is lone wolves or lone cells. It is very, very hard to penetrate, and you cannot comb house to house and try to do it. I don't know.
And I think that's exactly what the Israeli government is facing. As Tal Shalev mentioned, as you mentioned, we're joined on the phone now by Avi Sascharov, Walla website senior Arab affairs correspondent. Avi, good morning to you. As we were saying here, very little information coming out this morning, approximately an hour ago. Jerusalem, an attack in a synagogue, a very heinous attack, a very bloody attack. Already from the Israeli government, we were speaking to Minister from Yesh Atid, Mr. Lippman, saying that the incitement, all of this is on Abbas's hands. What can the Israeli government do? And at the end of the day, the million-dollar question is: this an intifada right now with a violent attack as such? Can the fingers be pointed towards the Palestinian Authority?
Yael, good morning, or bad morning. I think that this is the only thing that is left for the politicians in Israel, to blame Mahmoud Abbas for that. I doubt if there's any slightest connection between Abbas and this terrorist attack. But it's very easy for the Israeli politicians to point a finger at Mahmoud Abbas and say he's to blame. He's inciting. This is what we hear. Of course, there's no responsibility for Hamas, Islamic Jihad, the other Islamist radicals. And we need to wonder why. How comes that although the real incitement is coming from Hamas or even the Islamic movement inside Israel, headed by Sheikh Raed Salah, why no one points a finger at them? And I think that it's very easy for the government of Israel to blame Abbas, especially now that we have the UN discussion and the Security Council discussion regarding the recognition of Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, I think that everyone needs to understand that this is probably not connected to Abbas, not connected to Fatah or the Palestinian Authority. This is probably connected to Hamas, Islamic Jihad, even affiliated groups with Al-Qaeda or ISIS.
Right.
Nothing else than that. I would say that by pointing a finger at Hamas, if someone in Israel will dare to do that, that might bring Israel into a big problem, a huge problem, because we all know where the leaders of Hamas are located in, meaning Gaza.
Right.
And you don't want another war with Gaza.
No, and that's a very good point. Firstly, what we're hearing as initial reports right now is that the assailants were from East Jerusalem, supposedly Jabal Mukabar. Again, we have seen in Jerusalem all the latest attacks, people coming from East Jerusalem. One can argue that it's what's going on there when it comes also to settlement construction. But you were mentioning Hamas. Hamas has already said this morning that it's a heroic attack. We have to differentiate. That's not like taking responsibility for it, is it, Avi?
Exactly. Hamas, it's very easy for them to glorify this attack, but at the same time not to say we're responsible for that. And you know what? My general feeling is that, specifically, they're probably not responsible. No one gave the order, go now to this synagogue in Har Nof and slaughter people. But the general direction, the atmosphere that Hamas is giving to its people is go and kill, go and slaughter, go and do whatever you can in order to kill the Israelis, especially around Jerusalem, in order to create a war between two religions, meaning they want a religious war. They don't want just a national war. And I think that this is what they're trying to do, and that is succeeding, but still, the Israeli government insisting this is Abbas's fault.
Yeah, because, I mean, in terms of pointing the finger at somebody, at some sort of a figure out there. And, when it comes to everybody, and just really quickly calling this an intifada, I know the lingo doesn't really matter, but that would be, one cannot really refer to this as an organized, concerted effort at this point.
Exactly. Look, we're all trying to define whether it is an intifada or not a third uprising, whatever. At the end of the day, what we have here is a new model, meaning we have a few demonstrations here and there, but it's not large. It's not the big masses that we had all seen as October 2000 and December 1987. I think that we see a small demonstration together with separate attacks, sporadic attacks, taking place in, especially, then again, Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, and this is the new model that we see. Don't call it intifada, call it whatever. And this is what we're dealing with.
Avi Sischarov, Senior Arab Affairs Correspondent for Walla website, thank you for joining us this morning. As we mentioned, a terror attack in Jerusalem approximately an hour and a half ago in a synagogue, morning prayers. What we're hearing right now when it comes to numbers, supposedly were approximately 5 dead. Then the assailants, we were hearing 4 dead in this heinous attack using guns and supposedly also axes. We'll be following this attack all morning. Do stay with us. I-24 News. Thank you. Bye. Thank you for joining us. I-24 News Morning Edition. It is November 18th, 2014. Breaking news this morning, approximately a little over an hour ago. A terror attack in Jerusalem, in a synagogue in the neighborhood of Har Nof. We are hearing reports of 4 dead this morning. Joined on the phone, firstly, by Mickey Rosenfeld, who is the chief spokesperson for the Israeli police. Mickey, good morning to you. Again, what do we know at this point in time?
Good morning. What we've confirmed just after 7 o'clock this morning, 2 terrorists entered inside a synagogue in the neighborhood of Har Nof. Police units quickly arrived at the scene. 4 Israelis were killed, stabbed, and the quick response of the units there managed to prevent any further people from being injured. Altogether, we have 6 people that were injured at the scene, apart from the 2 terrorists that were shot, 4 in serious condition, and hospitals in Jerusalem still opened and dealing with the emergency situation. The area in Har Nof cordoned off, closed off, and police units continuing to search to make sure that there are no further terrorists in the area.
And there were reports about 20 minutes ago, supposedly, again, everything is rumor and supposition now, that supposedly there's another assailant running around in the area, there's another terrorist. Is that confirmed?
We're searching in any event to make sure there aren't any further terrorists. What we know is that the 2 suspects from East Jerusalem came into the synagogue and attacked innocent men that were praying in the early morning service. Since the attack, we've heightened security in Jerusalem. all different units dispatched in a number of different areas and neighborhoods, including public areas.
Now, when it comes to this attack, any information that we have right now about the terrorists that were gunned down, that were neutralized by the police, what do we know about them?
What we've confirmed until now is the terrorists are from one of the East Jerusalem neighborhoods. We're looking to see exactly how they made their way inside the area, inside Harnof, inside the synagogue, why they targeted that area. But unfortunately, as we've confirmed, 4 Israelis were killed inside the synagogue.
4 Israelis confirmed killed, and as you said, approximately 5 or several more critically injured. Mickey Rosenfeld, thank you for joining us this morning for the update of what we know thus far, Jerusalem terror attack happening an hour and a half ago. Joined in studio also by Ali Waked, senior Middle East analyst for I-24 News. Ali, we are hearing this morning that Hamas not taking responsibility, but saying that they are welcoming this attack and supposedly connecting it to the death of a bus driver in Jerusalem yesterday?
Yes, and the same reaction by the Islamic Jihad. We tried to talk this morning with Palestinian Authority representatives. They said that we should wait for the reaction of the Palestinian presidents. The people we talked with, they didn't like this attack, and the fact that this attack was carried out in a synagogue, it was the most embarrassing element for the Palestinian Authority, which tried to space with the religious elements of the conflict. The Palestinian Authority is in a very sensitive situation. We are expecting, and I anticipate that the Palestinian Authority will condemn this attack, but Abu Mazen will not be appreciated by Hamas and the Islamic Jihad once he will condemn this attack. And this is why the Palestinian Authority, Abu Mazen staff, is doing very delicate political calculations this morning, because on the balance we have a very human situation that imposes on the Palestinian Authority to condemn this attack. On the other hand, the Palestinian Authority will know that the Palestinian organization will not appreciate this condemnation. And the third point that I was told this morning by the Palestinian Authority representative, they said that during the Olmert and before Olmert, there was a kind of understanding between Israel and the Palestinian Authority that the Palestinian Authority can act discreetly without uniforms in the Palestinian neighborhoods of East Jerusalem. And during the Netanyahu 2 last terms, the Palestinian Authority was prevented from any kind of activity in the Palestinian neighborhood of East Jerusalem. So the Palestinian, and the third question they are asking, why they are expecting us to condemn an attack by citizens that they have the Israeli nationality, they have the Israeli ID.
Right. No, Ali Waked, very good points, and we are joined on the phone right now by Knesset Minister Moshe Feiglin of the Likud. Thank you for joining us this morning. Heinous attack in Jerusalem. Everybody is asking right now, what can the Israeli government do? What do you believe can be done at this point?
Let me first of all tell you that when you see a murder like this, slaughter like this, horrible scene like that, and the person you're talking to cannot condemn it, and you saying that it's a very good point, I see it as a very problematic problem with the way you.
No, we're speaking to a Middle East analyst who is not saying that this is a good attack. We were talking about the Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas theorizing if he will condemn it, yes or no.
Okay, so maybe I did not understand what's going on. Now, the point is very simple. The point is very simple. Who's right and who's wrong with the conflict over here? When Israel do not let Jews pray in the Temple Mount, in the holiest site of the Jewish nation, the message is the place is yours and we are just occupiers, and therefore go ahead and continue with your bloodshed, your murder, your violent way of life. When somebody tried to kill Rav Yehuda Glick, and as an answer, the Israeli government just went away from the conflict, built more and more shelters, instead of saying very simple thing: the place is ours. We are right. We have the history in the place. We have the justice in the place. Every Jew will be able to, from now on, to pray on the Temple Mount, and there will be only Israeli sovereignty on the Temple Mount. When we did not do this, we gave the terrorists a very clear message. We gave a prize to terror, and we encourage the terror to continue. And if we will continue this way, we'll see more and more Muslim acts of that kind.
Well, Minister Feiglin, I mean, it's valid points, obviously, from your spectrum of, from your political spectrum. That said, you know, when we're looking at this heinous, horrific attack this morning in a synagogue, many will argue and are afraid that this conflict is turning very religious right now, and we all know what religious conflict can end up with. So, I mean, what you're saying is that the Israeli government, you would like them to actually just come out right now and say Temple Mount is under Jewish and Israeli sovereignty? How can they combat the violence, though? Because obviously that will most likely beget more violence.
Look, when somebody is sitting in your living room and telling you, I'm sorry, it is your house is mine, and your answer is, you know what, sit down, maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong, I'll just look from around, you can only expect more and more violence until you be pushed away from your house, from your garden, from anywhere near your house. Because your message is, hey, actually, I agree with you. It's not mine. And therefore, it doesn't matter how nice you are, you're showing that you are on the wrong side of the map. The justice is not with you, is with the other side. So now going back to reality, when Israel is sitting in Jerusalem, sitting in the Temple Mount, in a place that every human being on earth knows, the Jewish history in the place, knows very well that it belongs to the Jews, but acting as it belongs to somebody else, we inviting violence that will push us away from our country. The only way to bring quiet and peace and security to the region is that the Jews finally will say the simple words, this is our land and only ours, and we're willing to fight to protect it. It is holy to us. Every other nation, every other human being is invited to come with respect and pray to God in Israel, understanding who it belongs to and who is the only sovereign at the place.
Is this
every other act, every different kind of act send the wrong message and invite the violence.
Is this the type of thing that you expect Prime Minister Netanyahu to actually come out and say out loud, even at the expense of a holy war?
I expected, first of all, we should all understand that we are in a religious war, whether we like it or not. And not only in Israel, it's all over the world. It's with ISIS, it's with the Muslims in London and everywhere else. If you're trying to bury your head in the sand and try to make believe that you're in a different kind of conflict, you can fool yourself, but you'll lose. You'll lose the war, and you'll lose the war. You can just hope that your head will stay connected to your shoulders, as we see with the horrible pictures from ISIS. This is exactly the war that we have now. And if in that war we're only running away and not saying the truth, yes, the Jerusalem belonged to the Jews, the land of Israel belonged to the Jews, and to the Jews only, because God gave that holy land to his people. If we cannot speak that language, if we cannot say it out and loud, we're going to lose that war and invite more bloodshed, not only to Israel, but to the entire world, as we saw. You know that the Twin Towers fell only after the Oslo Agreement was signed and the Jews started to give up on their land. When you try
I don't think we can connect the two, you know. But
yes, but I do. But I definitely do. You should understand, and everybody who listens to us should understand, that Israel is standing in the front line of the free world against the extreme Islamic world. And yes, the belief and the religious part of that war is there. We cannot run away from there. And when Europe and when the free world is pushing Israel from its holy land, it gets bloodshed not only in Jerusalem but in the entire world.
Okay.
This is fact. This is history, Any other direction will take will lead to more and more Twin Towers and ISIS and extreme Islamic bloodshed all over the world.
Right. Minister Feiglin, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Hopefully we can speak again throughout the day. As we said, a terror attack in Jerusalem, in a synagogue neighborhood of Har Nof. When we're listening to Tal Shalev, I-24 diplomatic correspondent, listening to Moshe Feiglin, who definitely has made the connection right now between this attack and almost every other possible terror attack that ever happened in the history of the world. But is this the type of thing that factions within the Netanyahu's coalition are going to ask for? Call this a religious war?
Well, I think it's not the question of asking, it's a question of the terminology. It is true that the minute you move into terror attacks in synagogues in the Jewish part of Jerusalem, then it is a different kind of war, at least can be termed like that. Now you can see the battle is on how to term it, a terror attack or a massacre. There are ministers who are already calling this a massacre in the synagogue, so that will be part of the case. But I think one of the interesting things is the difference between the Israeli political system and the Israeli security system on the way they treat Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, while the Israeli political system, at least the right-wing part of it, but also the center part, are pointing fingers to Abbas as the main reason for incitement, as the main main person responsible for these terror attacks. The Israeli security system actually treats Abbas as a stabilizing factor, specifically what Ali was speaking about before, in the West Bank, where Palestinian security forces are allowed to operate. We're not seeing terror attacks. We're seeing the terror attacks in Jerusalem, where there is no presence of Palestinian security forces, and there is some kind of dissonance between the cooperation that is going on the ground in the West Bank, but the political incitement and the political blame game going on the headlines.
On the headlines, and real quick, Ali Waqid, senior Middle Eastern analyst for I-24 News, when we're listening to Feiglin and what Tal Shalev said, you and I were very afraid of this becoming a religious war. From Shas, an Israeli ultra-Orthodox party, is already coming out saying, Aryeh Deri saying, this is a war. So, I mean, how can this be combated? Has this been attended also as a religious war on the Palestinian side?
Well,
to pick a synagogue?
I know that many Israelis will not appreciate what I'm going to say, but I know that Hamas people who were listening to what Feiglin says know that he is playing in the playground. They want this conflict to be in a religious one. Hamas, since its foundation in 1987, is accusing the Palestinian Authority, is accusing Fatah and the world that you are turning the conflict from being a religious one to a political territorial conflict. And this attack, when Abu Mazen will condemn in the coming hours this attack, Hamas will say that the Palestinian Authority did not condemn or didn't do anything to prevent mosques of being attacked. A couple of days ago in the West Bank, a mosque was burned. Now, when the Palestinian Authority said that there were no Israeli arrested for tens of attacks against mosques in the West Banks, these kind of attacks from the part of the Palestinians are expected. Now, attacks are expected. These kind of massacres and Tal, I think that there should not be any discussion about the terminology. It was a massacre, and the most dangerous thing from the eyes of the Palestinian Authority is the tools that were used in this massacre that says that they are part of the large parts of the Palestinian youth in the West Bank, in Gaza, and in East Jerusalem, yes, who are sympathizing the tools used by the Islamic State, by ISIS, and the influence of ISIS on the youth, on the Palestinian youth, whenever there is no peace process, there is no political process. The only alternative for the youth is this kind of tools and reactions.
Ali Waqid, thank you so much for being at this part of the show. Hopefully next one as well. When we get back, more of the breaking news. Terror attack in Jerusalem, 4 people dead, 2 assailants gunned down. Stay with us, I-24 News Morning Edition. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I-24 News Morning Edition, November 18th, 2014. Breaking news. Approximately an hour and a half ago, 2 terrorists enter a synagogue in Jerusalem, gunning down or killing with axes and guns and weapons 4 Israelis who were praying at the time. Initial reports trickling in. There are several injured, several critically injured. No organization has taken responsibility for this attack at this point right now. Of course, within the Israeli government, voices already pointing fingers at Mahmoud Abbas, the chairman, the president of the Palestinian Authority. And we are joined on the phone first right now by Uri Shacham of the Israeli Medical First Response Services. Uri Shacham, good morning to you. Thank you for being with us again. Please describe the scene. This is in the Har Nof neighborhood of Jerusalem.
Well, it's a tough morning in Jerusalem. In early morning at 7 o'clock, as all of the listeners already heard, we got a call about shooting taking place in a synagogue in Israel, in the middle of Jerusalem. MDA, Magen David Adom, paramedics and medics arrived to the scene minutes after the incident, while the incident is still occurring, while shooting is still taking place. They saw harsh views, people that were in their morning prayers, covered with blood after being hit by knives, by axes, by gunfire. And they immediately started emergency life-saving procedures as they are trained to. From the scene, in the scene, we treated 14 casualties, among them 4 that were declared dead at the scene, 4 that were evacuated to the hospital in critical condition, 2 in moderate condition, 2 with minor injuries. We also supplied more than 70 units of blood to the hospitals in Jerusalem to enable them perform surgeries to take care of these wounded.
It's a terrifying scene that has, information is being trickling in over the course of the morning, what sounds like a terrifying scene. But what you're describing is that this was actually, when first response units arrived at the scene, this was actually still an ongoing terror attack in many ways. The assailants, were they gunned down in the synagogue, the terrorists, or was there a pursuit outside?
Well, from our information, our first responders got to the scene while the attack was still ongoing. The security forces arrived with the MDA very quick to the scene and neutralized the terrorists while they were still trying to attack innocent civilians walking in the neighborhood. Remember that it's early morning in Jerusalem. People are going to the synagogue. People are taking their kids to the kindergarten, and among this, suddenly a terror attack. We don't get ready for this, but we are prepared. Right. We are in a high level of alert in Jerusalem for the last couple of months. Our first responders are ready. Our ambulances are ready. And unfortunately, it hit us again.
And sadly, I have to go through the numbers with you yet again. We are looking at this attack that happened about approximately an hour and a half ago, as you rightfully mentioned, in a synagogue in the early hours of a day where people are coming out to start their day, families, whatnot. We're looking at 4 people that you said were dead, that were killed in this terror attack at the scene. How many injured right now?
Additional 4 with critical injuries, 2 with moderate injuries, and 2 with minor injuries. Now, please remember that moderate injury means that the victim doesn't have an immediate threat for his life, but the wound can be horrifying. It could be an amputated limb. It could be a big artery that was cut with a knife. The medical terms are quite professional, but behind this, there can be horrifying injuries.
Uri Shacham of the Israeli Magen David Adom, the First Medical Response Team that arrived at the scene of this horrific terror attack in a synagogue in Jerusalem. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm joined in studio by I-24 News' Anthony Grant, who usually joins me with the news that is happening this morning. You can't miss anything, of course. Ruthie Sinai, also I-24 News senior news editor, with me in studio as well. Tony, I want to start with you. This is clearly I almost want to call it a rolling event. This is something that has happened about an hour and a half ago. Is this being picked up already around the world?
Absolutely. I mean, this is also the kind of thing where we're getting, fresh details from someone like Yuri, who just spoke, and I think the details that he's talking about are going to be finding their way into the written press accounts, sort of as we speak. For example, we had this morning, very early, the BBC, of course, just with the headline online about the attack. Very factual, not a whole lot of details, but calling it, a terror attack at Jerusalem Synagogue.
They did call it a terror attack. That's an interesting.
So,
okay.
yeah. And but there was a stripe, breaking news like on USA Today. Again, it's kind of it's real early in the morning there in the east coast of the U.S. Mentioning the attack. I don't know if they used the word terror attack, but I'm sure that's going to be coming into the headline as soon as sort of people get to work there in the U.S. But again, there we have the BBC at synagogue attack kills 4 Israelis. Again, this is like the first report that they've had. So it's going to you're going to see modifications to the language as.
As information comes in, and it's interesting that you're saying that, because I think over the course of the last, Ruthie, you will agree with me, obviously, that over the course of the last month and a half, as we were looking at this wave of violence in Jerusalem, in Israel, nobody shies away from calling it terror attacks, whether around the world, where you're looking at foreign outlets, it's the lingo that's being used. An attack, an assailant rather than terrorist.
Yeah, we too are careful on our website here to, our initial report this morning also said attack, reported injuries, circumstances unclear. It takes a while to, know what it is.
To figure it out, definitely, but I think as information is coming in, you can't take away from the fact.
Right, and also, a French site, TF1, of course, uses the word attentat, which in French is basically terror attack. Right. So it's kind of built into the language, and calling a spade, it's a tragedy, no matter how you slice it. But
no, definitely. I mean, this is a heinous, scene of an attack that we're looking at, and this is
French
attentat done in a synagogue,
which is a major French news source. So
CNN was also leading with it, I saw.
So this is being picked up all around. Clearly, I think when we're looking at this attack being picked up like this, because as we mentioned, for over the course of the last month and a half, there's been a wave of violence. It's been one-man bands who've been attacking, driving into pedestrians. But the scene here, which, by the way, very dramatic pictures given to us. Actually, this was originally shot. It looks like somebody shooting this with a cell phone. Very dramatic scene, because this is actually this was an ongoing attack while people arrived.
You hear the pop. You
actually hear the gunshots. You actually hear what's going on inside. The terrifying scene of 2 assailants walking into a synagogue, a holy place of prayer, in the morning with, as we mentioned before, guns and what seems to be also axes,
guns,
knives, and very in kind of an ISIS modus operandi. I hate to make that comparison, but with everything possible.
They also reportedly were shouting Allahu Akbar. This is what worshippers were reporting afterwards.
And I have to mention, as I was saying before we got into the studio, the headlines in a lot of American papers are still so focused on Kasich, the aid worker who was beheaded by ISIS, and now you're getting this. It's this relentless sort of news of violence, which is. I don't know how to describe it, but it's unfortunately it just it seems to be ongoing.
And
the press is.
A video released overnight by Al Qaeda in the Maghreb in North Africa of 2 additional hostages being held and threatened with death, a Frenchman and a Dutchman, and a terror report being issued yesterday showing that since 9/11 there have been 18,000 fatalities in terror attacks.
No, and the frightening thing about when you look at these terror attacks, we spoke to Minister of the Likud, Knesset Minister Moshe Feiglin, a short while ago, who was actually calling this a religious war. We're getting information also now that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has already announced that he will be calling a special security cabinet meeting this afternoon. He's already been quoted, that's Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that the reaction will be with a fierce hand, with a strong hand, the reaction will be to this attack in Jerusalem, as we mentioned, an hour and a half ago, approximately, in Jerusalem, a terror attack, gunning down 2 assailants walking to a synagogue with guns, knives, and axes, killed 4 people who were praying in the morning, injured dozens more. They were neutralized later on by police, killed across the street, I do believe. But, Ruthie, I want to, I'm looking with you at these pictures. The hardest thing about these attacks, and this is something that obviously Israel is going to have to react with a strong hand. The question is against whom? because nobody's actually taking responsibility. Hamas can praise it.
Yeah, Hamas praised it, and Fatah was saying, well, this is a natural occurrence given all the latest events in Jerusalem, without going into what these latest events are. It seems that the trigger is the story with this Palestinian bus driver who was found hanged in his bus very near, there's a bus depot very near to this neighborhood, right, the neighborhood one over to where this attack occurred. The police are ruling it a suicide. The family refuses.
The Palestinian
bus driver who was found hanged in the bus. An autopsy was performed yesterday in the presence of a Palestinian pathologist with the family's consent. The ruling out of that autopsy says suicide, but you know how the rumor mill is, so the initial reactions were that the Jews killed him and Jewish settlers strung him up and so on, and this kind of stirred things up, and since the atmosphere is very tense anyway, this could well have been a trigger for this horrible attack. We should also keep in mind, Yael and Tony, the fact that, the pictures of Jews wrapped in prayer shawls, being attacked and with blood on them, they take people back to very dark history. And, we can all sit here and say, yes, we're a modern state and we're not under threat and we have supposedly nuclear weapons and planes and whatever and bombs, but the fact is that there's really very little. This takes me back to your question, what can one do and who can one do it against? Very difficult. You've got, 2-3 people who are,
Yeah. And on the phone right now, we are joined by Ashraf Al-Ajami, former minister in the Palestinian Authority. Mr. Al-Ajami, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Well, I know these are very hard times in Jerusalem, and when we're speaking to Israeli ministers in the Knesset, everybody's pointing their fingers at Mahmoud Abbas. Prime Minister Netanyahu was just quoted again saying this is a direct result of incitement.
If there is an incitement, real incitement, it is the incitement which came from the Israeli government, which came also from the provocations that the Israeli right wing did all the time, especially in East Jerusalem and the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Holy Square. What happens there is a very high tension caused by the Israeli side, not President Mahmoud Abbas, but the Palestinian people suffered all the time in East Jerusalem and the West Bank because of the building of the settlements, because of the controlling the houses there. And what the Israeli government did all the time is to change the status quo in East Jerusalem. And this made the high tension. And
I know, but Mr. Al-Ajami, when we're looking at what cannot be called anything else but a massacre this morning within an Israeli synagogue, within a religious place, that this has moved into a completely religious level, then shouldn't the Palestinian Authority condemn such an attack?
Of course. The Palestinian Authority condemned any attack against innocent people, if they are Palestinians or Israelis. We don't like to see any kind of violence in this region and between the two people. We want to have a peaceful solution based on the principle of two states for two people. And what we see from the two sides is, unfortunately, a clash that may cause more and more casualties.
Yeah, and when we hear the Israeli Prime Minister saying we're going to react with a strong hand, what do you think there should be the reaction from the other side, from the Palestinian Authority then?
I think the only way to make this this tension and the provocations and the clashes between the sides stop, I think the only way is to go to negotiations and to have a solution for the conflict. Without having a solution for the conflict, nothing can be done.
We can agree about that. We're just hearing reports, though, that within the West Bank, that Palestinian civilians are shooting fireworks and celebrating. So it's situation as such. Shouldn't there be some sort of, other than just condemnation, but from the Palestinian Authority to stop even shows of happiness, which is an awful thing to say at the moment when people are massacred in a synagogue in Jerusalem?
The Palestinian Authority did its best to control the situation in the West Bank, the places or the territories under its control.
Right.
But they can't do anything in the places under the Israeli security control. So the Palestinian security services all the time arrest people, groups, who involved in any kind of violence. And this is what they can do.
But Mr. Ajami, thank you for joining us this morning. Once again, as we mentioned, breaking news this morning, a terror attack in Jerusalem in a synagogue, 4 people murdered, 2 assailants. The 2 terrorists have been neutralized by police. Do stay with us. We'll be bringing you live reports from this breaking news event, terror attack in Jerusalem. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. November 18th, 2014. Breaking news in the Middle East, in Israel this morning. In Jerusalem, a terror attack. 2 gunmen, 2 terrorists, enter a synagogue in West Jerusalem, Jerusalem proper as it's referred to here, and gun down and murder 4 people. The assailants, the terrorists themselves, have been neutralized in a battle with Jerusalem police that ensued right after they entered the synagogue. But as we said, what we are hearing from the ground are heinous, horrific scenes from that synagogue of pools of blood, of people dead on the floor, of more people injured that have been taken to the Jerusalem hospitals. We are joined, obviously, in studio by I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu already responding to this very, very harsh, very strong, very bloody attack in Jerusalem.
Well, Netanyahu will be convening a special security consultation in his office later on today in Jerusalem, and this is following a special consultation that the defense minister is holding as we speak in Tel Aviv, trying to reassess this new situation. The fact that this terror attack does happen in the west side of Jerusalem, the west part of Jerusalem, unlike the previous attacks that were on the borderline, does create a new situation that Netanyahu has to deal with, and is also prompting very harsh responses from the political systems, primarily from the right-wing side of the political system, who are calling to launch a war, a wide-scale operation to battle terror in Jerusalem. Netanyahu does say, as we expected, that this attack is a direct result of the incitement led by Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and the Hamas movement. And he also adds that this is incitement that the international community is irresponsibly ignoring, and he does vow to react forcefully. What is the arrow? What is the wide range of measures that Netanyahu can deploy at the moment? It's not clear, but this will probably be discussed very thoroughly this afternoon in the meeting.
As you mentioned, in the cabinet meeting. And as we mentioned, this is a very, very violent attack. Jerusalem has been witnessing a wave of what people refer to a wave of terror over the course of the last month and a half. This one, though, definitely the bloodiest, the most violent one. We are joined on the phone by Avi Nafusi. He is one of the paramedics who was the first response paramedics on the scene. Avi, good morning to you. Do you tell us, when you arrived at the scene, what was going on in the Jerusalem synagogue in the neighborhood of Har Nof?
Good morning. I was actually on the way out of the house. I live a few blocks away, and I got the call on the United Atzal radio that there's shooting going on in the neighborhood in one of the shuls. I right away rushed to the scene. I got there within, I would say, within 90 seconds. And when I got to the scene, I was told to go for cover. because there's still shooting going on. And there was, maybe for the next 3 minutes, there was shooting between the Israeli police and the terrorists. While we were for cover, I got all my equipment ready, and then we got the okay to go into the shul. As I was going to the shul, I saw the two terrorists, the entrance, and there were a few bodies laying by the entrance and in the shul. Unfortunately, some that I did recognize, and then we saw those who were injured.
Is this a synagogue that you attend yourself? Is this a synagogue that I mean, obviously in your neighborhood?
Yes, we do. There's a hall in that synagogue on the -1 floor, and we do attend for occasionally any parties or anything going on. So it's a very well-known synagogue in the neighborhood where we all attend. Right away, we went to get some stretchers, and we got out those who were badly injured, and we transferred them to the hospital. And us as EMTs at United Hatzalah, we got the call. We were there right away. Within I would say within a minute, there were already EMTs at the scene.
Right.
And
no,
it's terrible.
No, it definitely, you know, what is being described as a massacre. This is clearly your neighborhood, Avi, and you're with United Hatzalah, as you mentioned. How many people approximately attend that synagogue in the mornings for morning prayers?
That was in early prayers. I'd say maybe around 20 people attend for that time of the day. There were a few minyanim during the day, and that was the 6:30 minyan, I think. And I'm not exactly sure how many people were there this morning before the scene happened, but I'd say maybe around 20 people.
Right. Now, as you mentioned, I mean, this is a central synagogue in what seems to be in a residential neighborhood in Hanof in Jerusalem. But you were describing a scene when you arrived. Actually, the battle was still going on. You said that you actually saw the two terrorists?
Yes, I did.
In what way? They were coming out, they were running out, there was a police battle?
They're already, one of them was already shot, he was already killed on the floor, and another one who was getting there, and the police were standing over him and with the guns out. And I just ignored that scene. I just rushed straight into the synagogue. Into
the synagogue, trying to help the people the injured, the people who were the victims of this horrific attack. Avi Nafusi of United Hatzalah, first of all, amazing job this morning. Do keep safe, and thank you for joining us. Tal Shalev, I-24 News diplomatic correspondent. More responses from the government?
Well, we have a response actually from the international community. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, who arrived this morning in London, starting to prepare the Iran-Vienna talks that will conclude today, already speaks to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu by phone, condemns the attacks, and offers his condolences. Netanyahu, but as we heard earlier and we mentioned earlier, is expecting also the international community not only to condemn the attack, but to condemn and to clarify to the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas that he is responsible to this wave of terror in many ways. Netanyahu is not said enough with just the international community condemning the attacks, but wants the international community to adopt the Israeli position that sees the Abbas responsible for this wave of violence and not see him as an legitimate international player.
The incitement, meaning via the calls over, as we saw over the course of the last several weeks, Abbas, as they were commemorating him, Yasser Arafat, standing on that stage, also calling for, the people of Jerusalem to protect it.
And mentioning Kerry, it's quite tragic because just last Thursday, Kerry was here in the region, in Amman, trying to calm down the situation. It did seem like that might have helped the trilateral meeting that Netanyahu, Kerry, and King Abdallah had last week in Amman. But here again, and he was also trying maybe to create a situation. We also have a diplomatic front that is approaching in the UN Security Council. So while diplomatic tensions are so high, this definitely doesn't help Kerry try and promote the diplomatic situation when on the ground tensions are so high.
And the defense minister today also is going to give him an assessment of the situation. I think yesterday it was said that Prime Minister Netanyahu said that any assailant in Jerusalem, any terrorist in Jerusalem, he was calling for more house demolitions of their families. But clearly in an attack like this, there are going to be voices within his coalition calling for more action, right? And when Netanyahu says, and I'm asking you to theorize, this is going to be reacted to with a strong hand, what can that even be?
Well, that's part of one of the problems, one of the lacunas, you might say, in the East Jerusalem situation is that the Israeli police is the one working there and not the Israeli army. We see in the West Bank a relative quiet and calm. It's the Israeli army there cooperating with the Palestinian security forces. The gray area of East Jerusalem is one that makes it much more difficult to deal with, and also has different implications. For instance, the order to demolish houses of families of terrorists is quite controversial. Not everyone in the Israeli security system thinks it's efficient. Does it actually deter other terrorists? How do you deter? Up until now, the Israeli government has not yet found a successful way to deter terrorists from continuing this wave of violence. And we can see that the weapons are very easy to acquire. We're talking about an axe. We're talking about a car. We're talking about a knife. And all of this creates a much more difficult situation for Netanyahu and the security forces to deal with. Also, taking into consideration that you do not want to create an all breakout war in the Palestinian neighborhoods in East Jerusalem. So you have to be careful not to create more riots. Everything is very, very tense, but Netanyahu is also under a lot of political pressure, as you mentioned. He will have to at least announce something that seems like he's going up to the next step, at least to give the impression that he's using much more harshful and severe measures to battle
ministers, as we've spoken earlier to Minister Moshe Feiglin of the Likud, of Netanyahu's party, who actually holding no bars back, basically said Netanyahu has to come out there and say this is a war of Jerusalem, and announce the sovereignty of Israel over Temple Mount.
Netanyahu doesn't have much. The problem is that Netanyahu does not have much international maneuver space here at the moment. Most of the international community is not condemning Abbas for the incitement because they see Israel as part of the responsible to the deterioration in the situation. Just to remind, in the past year, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has been warning again and again that the status quo is unsustainable. Not Israel nor the Palestinian leadership has taken any courageous moves to move forward and to create a different status quo, to change the status quo. But the international community will not accept Israel deploying harsh moves in East Jerusalem. There is a limit to what Netanyahu can do in this situation, and he is strained by his political, and this is always the case, he's strained by his political base, the right-wing political base, pushing him to take a much more firm hand, and by the international community who is pushing him for restraint. And in between, he has to find a way to control his reign and to at least give an impression of controlling the situation.
In one way, shape, or form. And as you mentioned, within his coalition, as we said, we spoke earlier to Moshe Feiglin of the Likud, a minister of the Knesset, saying this is what he thinks the reaction should be from the Israeli government. Let's take a listen.
When Israel do not let Jews pray in the Temple Mount, in the holiest site of the Jewish nation, the message is the place is yours and we are just occupiers, and therefore go ahead and continue with your bloodshed, your murder, your violent way of life. When somebody tried to kill Rav Yehuda Glick, and as an answer, the Israeli government went away from the conflict, built more and more shelters, instead of saying very simple thing: the place is ours. We are right. We have the history in the place. We have the justice in the place. Every Jew will be able to, from now on, to pray on the Temple Mount, and there will be only Israeli sovereignty on the Temple Mount. When we did not do this, we gave the terrorists a very clear message. We gave a prize to terror, and we encourage the terror to continue.
Tal Shalev, I-24 News diplomatic correspondent. Feiglin there made the connection constantly between the Palestinian Authority, Hamas, and ISIS. This is something that's coming out from many factions of government, right?
Well, actually, it's coming out now from the official spokesman of Netanyahu, Mark Regev, the foreign press spokesman, who does say that today's terror attack is fueled by the same Islamist ideology that is behind the brutal beheadings, the brutal IS beheadings in Syria and Iraq. Israel does want to create, and has been trying to do so in the past few months, to try and create a united front to show Israel's combat against terrorist attacks is the same fight, the same battle that the Western world is trying to hold against the IS threat in Syria and Iraq.
But the interesting bit of that is also the fact that, Hamas, obviously the Palestinian Authority or the Islamic Jihad that just, praised the attack, is that nobody's actually taking responsibility. So the million-dollar question is, when it comes to Gaza, and there are people shooting, fireworks in Gaza right now, celebrating, Netanyahu is not somebody that right now, in order to show, his force, he's not going to he can't send the Air Force again to Gaza or try and hit somebody.
No, that's one of the problems, that there is no clear affiliation of this attack, and there hasn't been any clear affiliation of the previous attacks. Many various organizations have been taking responsibility. It's not clear how much organized all of these attacks is, but when we noticed this attack today, it was a very well-planned massacre. This wasn't something that someone just got up in the morning and decided to take a knife. This was something that was well orchestrated, well planned, and this is something that the Israeli authorities will have to try and investigate and see exactly why nothing came up and why there wasn't any alert for this kind of attack.
And joining us real quickly is Danny Swibel, I-24 News correspondent at the scene by the synagogue in Har Nof. Danny, good morning to you. Do tell us what is going on the ground there right now.
As it stands behind me at the synagogue, the cleanup crew is just cleaning up blood in front of the synagogue. This is believed to be from the two assailants that were killed by police officers who arrived on the scene. From what we heard from the commissioner, some of the different spokespeople for the police, they were telling us that these terrorists knew exactly what they were doing. They knew that there would be a lot of worshipers at this time of day, about 60 to 80 worshipers perhaps, so they knew this was a good time to come in and do what they did. Currently, there are 6 people injured in the hospital. 2 of them are police officers and 4 of them are seriously injured. The residents here are definitely in shock. They were always, concerned about the recent attacks on bus stops, but now it took place in a synagogue, and there's definitely shock and awe in this neighborhood as it stands.
That was Danny Swibel, I-24 News correspondent at the scene. As we mentioned, breaking news this morning, a little bit over 2 hours ago, 2 terrorists enter a synagogue in the Har Nof neighborhood of West Jerusalem with knives, with guns, killing 4 people, injuring dozens more. The assailants themselves have been neutralized by the Jerusalem police, but very tense situation in Jerusalem this morning. Do stay with I-24 News. We will update you throughout the day.